Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and members of the committee, thank you for taking the time today for this hearing. Chairman Smith, I appreciate your opening statement and the details of some of the effects that prior trade policy has had in your district. And Mr. Neal, I appreciate the work we've done in the past and your willingness to continue working with us. Last Wednesday, President Trump declared a national emergency in response to the large and persistent trade deficit that has built up in recent years. This deficit is driven in part by non-reciprocal tariffs, trading barriers, and other economic policies pursued by our foreign trading partners. President Trump imposed tariffs to address this emergency. These measures are aimed squarely at achieving reciprocity and reducing our massive trade deficit. This national emergency declaration and tariff action is the most significant change in U.S. trade policy since we allowed China, unfortunately, to join the World Trade Organization. The American working class, in particular, has suffered concentrated losses from the so-called China shock and other adverse effects of past trade policy and the conditions that give rise to our massive trade deficit. The United States has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs and 90,000 factories since 1994. President Biden left us with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit in goods, the largest of any country in the history of the world. The United States share of world manufacturing output declined from 28% in 2001 to 17% last year. In the fourth quarter of 2024, U.S. manufacturing as a share of gross domestic product was the lowest it had been in 20 years. During COVID, we were unable to procure semiconductors to build our cars or materials for pharmaceuticals and personal protective equipment. During World War II, we built nearly 9,000 ships. Last year, the United States built only 3 ocean-going vessels. Our agricultural trade balance, which historically resulted in trade surpluses for our farmers, was in deficit the last 2 years of the Biden administration and likely will take some time to recover. These are all serious indicators of an economic and national security emergency. One important driver of these negative trends has been unfair, unbalanced, and non-reciprocal trade. This includes the effect of higher tariffs imposed by other countries on the United States, the effect of non-tariff measures that promote other countries' exports and obstruct U.S. exports, and other foreign economic policies favoring overproduction and degrading America's manufacturing capacity. This lack of reciprocity is an important driver of our global trade deficit and with particular countries. For example, the European Union can sell us all the shellfish they want, but the EU bans shellfish from 48 states. The result is a huge trade deficit in shellfish with the EU. We charge only a 2.5% tariff on ethanol, but Brazil charges us an 18% tariff. The result is we have a huge trade deficit in ethanol with Brazil. Our average tariff on agricultural goods is 5%, but India's average tariff is 39%. You get the picture. Our trade deficit, driven by these non-reciprocal conditions, is a manifestation of the loss of the nation's ability to make, to grow, and to build, and it's dangerous. And the president recognizes the urgency of the moment. On the very first day of his second term, President Trump issued a comprehensive memorandum setting out his trade policy direction. And over the past 10 weeks, he has executed on nearly all of these priorities. He has tightened tariffs on steel and aluminum, imposed new measures on auto and auto parts not made in the United States by American workers. On April 2nd, he declared his national emergency and imposed the reciprocal tariffs. The president's strategy is already bearing fruit. Over the past few weeks, a planned layoff for an auto production shift in Tennessee has been suspended. That shift continues to operate. Another automaker is hiring additional employees and expanding overtime to increase auto production in the United States. Companies have announced $4 trillion in new investment in the United States. Nearly 50 countries have approached me to discuss the president's new trade policy and explore how to achieve reciprocity. Several of these countries, such as Argentina, Vietnam, and Israel, have suggested they will reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers. These obviously are welcome moves. Our large and persistent trade deficit has been over 30 years in the making, and it will not be resolved overnight, but all of this is certainly in the right direction. We must move away from an economy based solely on the financial sector and government spending, and we must become an economy based on producing real goods and services by American workers in our communities here. This adjustment may be challenging at times. This is a moment of drastic and overdue change, but I'm confident that the American people will rise to the occasion as they've done before. I trust them. I trust that they can do this. I appreciate this committee's interest in President Trump's trade agenda, though we may not agree on everything and may have some severe disagreements at times. It's my hope that our shared interest in doing what's right for the country will allow us to collaborate in the coming weeks and months. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to our conversation.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Ambassador, thanks for being here. There's a quote in the movie Tora, Tora, Tora from Admiral Yamamoto, and he says, "What I fear is that we have awakened a sleeping giant." Thank God we've looked around at what's happening in the world. Twice America has gone to world war to save the world. We did it in World War I, we did it in World War II. And after World War II, the people that we saved and some of the people that we fought against were absolutely devastated. They had no way to build themselves back up again. So what did America do? We opened our markets because we have always been the most generous people in the world, and we're always the first responder. No matter what happens anywhere in the world, who's there first? It's always the Yanks. We have ceded so much market share. We have rebuilt, for most of the world, an economy that they never could have achieved on their own. Now we're facing a situation with all of those who we've helped don't like us playing in their market. They love coming to America, but they don't want America coming to them. They make it very hard for us to do trade with them, whether it's through tariffs or barriers, which our manufacturers can't meet. And we sit here today trying to make this a political event instead of a country-saving event. I come from a little town called Butler, Pennsylvania. Butler at one time was a home of a steel mill. Still is. We built railroad cars. Pullman was there. We built the first Jeep. We were known as that town. Blue-collar town. People get up in the morning, work hard, and what they look for is that chance to get some overtime. Last summer, we became known as the town with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. We're resilient. We always bounce back. We always will bounce back. And I got to tell you, I have some statements from the people that actually work every day, get up and go to work, and they're looking at a market that they're constantly losing market share in, and they wonder, who is going to stand up and do something? Who's finally going to talk about the real problems in America and quit talking about the stock market? Stop talking about all these other things, because I've watched it go up, I've watched it go down, I've watched it go sideways, I watched it where some people say, I don't like to play in that because I don't understand how it works. Here's the one thing I do know, and you know it too. It's all about work. It's all about market share. Jamie Sychek from UAW 3303, we were in a dire situation, not because of foreign competition. That hurt us a lot. We went from a steel plant that were 7,000 people down to there's about 1,300. We produced something called grain-oriented electric steel, the only producer of that product in America, and we were in danger of losing it because we had an administration that had a blind eye and a deaf ear to what they were giving up. Also, Jim Winnings, who operates a factory down in Mars, Pennsylvania, shares his view with me about how much market share they've lost. So I'm amazed when we try to turn this into a political battle and not a USA saving grace battle where we finally wake up. And just as Admiral Yamamoto feared in World War II, all we have done is to awake a sleeping giant. We have given away so much of our market and been denied access to other markets. We are the first responder every time something goes wrong in the world. I would just like to see the world treat us with the same respect as we have treated them. Level the playing field. That's all the president's asking for. Level the playing field. Don't make it impossible for us to play. Don't tell us, yes, you can come here as long as you meet these standards, knowing that the standards they've set we can't meet. Yet we still allow them to come in. I sell Chevrolets. I sell Hyundais, I sell Kias, I sell Toyotas, and I sell Mitsubishis. People say, why is it that you have to do that? I said, to make payroll. Most of these companies have factories in the United States, and they have come here to help build, not to tear down with American workers. I really applaud what you're doing. I applaud the President of the United States for having the backbone to stand up and fulfill a pledge that others have made before him. They've stood on the floor of the Congress and talked about this and railed about what's happening to our markets and done not a damn thing about it. He stands up into a stiff wind and says, it's going to hurt for a while until we get back to where we need to be. It's always should be America first, and anybody that doesn't think that way, please tell me what the hell country you think you're going to take your wife and your kids to and your grandkids to. There is no other place in the world like America, and we have been so generous and so welcoming, and as I said earlier, we've saved the world twice. Now it's time for us to say to the world, if you want us to be the first responder, you can't keep stealing our market and not allowing us to play in yours. Ambassador, you've got a hell of a task in front of you. The biggest task you have is this has become a political agenda and not a saving the United States of America. America first, please, for everybody. I am red, white, and blue. I could care less whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Just wake up and understand that we cannot stand to lose any more market share, and we better be tough on this one, or we turn our backs on the future. And I've got 10 grandchildren that are relying on me to stand up, and hopefully other members of this committee will do the same thing. This is not about tearing Trump down. This is about building America up. Thank you.
Mr. Lahood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Greer, welcome back. Thank you for your prior service under the last Trump administration and all the work you put in on USMCA, and happy to see you in this new position. I wanted to talk about agriculture and get your take on how tariffs affect agriculture. My district that I am proud to represent is the 10th largest ag district in the country in terms of corn and soybean production. The #1 industry in the state of Illinois is agriculture. People are surprised by that. Illinois has led the nation the last 12 years in soybean production. We've been second in corn production the last 6 years. And in my district, we load up a lot of commodities on barges on the Illinois and the Mississippi River. They go down to New Orleans, they get offloaded, and they go all around the world. About 40% of the corn and soybeans in my district, again, go to places all across the globe. And so markets and customers are very, very important. And I will just say at the outset that I appreciate what President Trump is doing in terms of addressing long-standing trade deficits and bringing down barriers to trade, and also your commitment for looking for new trade deals and entering negotiations to address tariff and non-tariffs across the globe. But as I talk to my farmers, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty, because when we get into a trade war, usually the first pawn in the trade war is agriculture. And as we look at the timeline and chronology moving forward, Ambassador Greer, what would you tell my farmers in terms of that uncertainty and anxiety that they're feeling right now?
Well, the first thing to note is that almost all countries have announced that they're not going to retaliate against the United States. Obviously, we have China that has made its own choice. They've always given us a hard time. They've always limited our access over there, and they're doubling down on that path. That's an issue of Chinese agency. Indonesia, India, so many other countries have affirmatively said we're not retaliating. And those are actually many of the countries that are coming to us and saying we're willing to take down our tariffs. Vietnam unilaterally decided to reduce its tariffs on apples, cherries, certain corn products, ethanol, et cetera. So we're already seeing the kind of movement we would expect, and that's something that I think is an important message to our farmers.
Thank you for that. I want to switch topics to digital trade. And I believe we have a tremendous opportunity in digital trade, and the United States must lead in setting global rules and standards. We can't allow non-market adversaries like China in particular to set these standards and further manipulate the digital trade agenda. Unfortunately, under the Biden administration, we ceded this authority, and we've seen the consequences of discriminatory policies hurting U.S. innovation. I think we can be aggressive working with our like-minded partners and allies to build on the progress made during President Trump's first administration, including the digital agreement with Japan and the robust standards set in the digital chapter of USMCA, which is, in my view, kind of the gold standard for future trade agreements. What can you say today, Ambassador Greer, on how you view the expanding U.S. leadership in digital trade moving forward in this administration?
Well, I think it's a huge comparative advantage that we have. Our digital commerce companies and digital trade companies are the most competitive in the world. And they're competing with ones from China. And in that competition, we have to win. And if I have other countries discriminating against our champions, that's bad for America, it's bad for our companies and workers, and it's bad for the world. And I know we're having a national conversation, politically on how to regulate, digital tech, et cetera, but in no case can we allow discrimination to undermine our competitive advantage here.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for being here. It's my opinion that part of the reason President Trump has taken such drastic action on trade is due to the fact that there was no trade agenda under the Biden administration. And I didn't hear any sniping from the other side about that. The past administration's failure to engage in meaningful conversations with our trade partners opened the door for countries to run afoul of the World Trade Organization tariff agreements and to impose excessive non-tariff barriers. These countries have had no incentive to negotiate, and they've been massively benefiting from the system as it is. For example, in my state, the hardwood companies have been pummeled by China, dumping their hardwood in the American market. China gained at our expense while we were asleep at the wheel. Thankfully, that is not the policy of the United States today. Due to President Trump's swift action, more than 70 countries are knocking down our door, ready to negotiate a trade deal. Today, I want to focus on the future of our trade agenda. Looking to the very near future, the administration is required by statute to undertake the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement review process in 2026. I can't understate the importance of the USMCA to my constituents. The growth in the manufacturing sector, spurred on by our cooperation with Canada and Mexico, has helped sustain thousands of jobs in my district. I'm well aware that this agreement is not perfect, and we are fortunate to have the review process in place in order to make the necessary improvements. Ambassador Greer, what commitments can you make to us today in regard to the USMCA review? Specifically, how will you use this opportunity to advance President Trump's goals of promoting domestic manufacturing, and how will you engage with Congress to facilitate this process?
Thank you, Congresswoman. And I'll just note that goods coming from Canada and Mexico right now that comply with the rules of the agreement continue to enter duty-free. This is an important agreement. I met with my Mexican counterpart last night. I have worked in the works. I have a meeting with my Canadian counterparts, and we expect that we will initiate the public consultation process that's required by the statute at some point at the time required. I think with the USMCA, it's important that Canada and Mexico not be used as an export platform for third countries. That's not what we want. USMCA should be an agreement that promotes manufacturing in America, and that we can rely on our partners to the north and south if needed. But it can't be a situation where countries can just come in, China or Vietnam or somebody, build a factory in Mexico, assemble it with parts from there, and send it across, and get the benefit of an agreement where they've taken no obligations. So I want to make sure that it truly is an agreement that helps America first.
Thank you. I've greatly appreciated your leadership in protecting American digital companies abroad. You and I are in agreement about the dangers of South Korea's anti-competitive policies towards American digital companies. I intend to reintroduce legislation that seeks to ensure that American companies are not being harmed by one of our closest allies, while Chinese companies are left unscathed. The digital trade sector is rapidly growing, and it's important that we do not lose market share to China in this critical field. Several countries are considering legislation that mimics the European Union's Digital Markets Act, which has undisputably caused a digital winter for American tech companies operating in Europe. What are your plans to address these harmful policies and to ensure the prosperity of American digital trade? And do you think that digital trade will play a part in the imminent trade discussions regarding the Liberation Day tariffs?
Thank you. So first of all, I understand that there's obviously a national conversation going on about how digital trade should be regulated, and there are lots of views on that. What I will say is we're not going to outsource that regulation. We're not going to let the European Union or Korea or any other jurisdiction set the rules for digital trade. It will be us, and they won't be able to do it in a way that's discriminatory either. That is impermissible, especially when we have, as you noted, the Chinese competition out there. If we're going to have companies that operate in this space and are so competitive in this space, we need to make sure that they're American companies, right? That's what we need to make sure. And so this is certainly something that we can talk about in any negotiations that come up.
Thank you. We have historically forged some of our strongest alliances based on procuring critical minerals, which are difficult or nearly impossible to obtain in the U.S. Will you commit to exploring trade discussions and partnerships with like-minded partners to protect and build up our critical minerals today?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to invoke a moment of a point of personal privilege. When the ambassador called me, it was more to inform me of what the administration was going to do. It wasn't to consult or to seek my opinion as to what they were going to do.
Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to show a slide to everybody documenting where we are with the United States and the U.S. trade deficit. I think this really shows why this is an emergency. If you look at where we are with manufacturing goods, that's in the red column here. If you look at what has happened to the manufacturing capacity of the United States, we have plummeted, absolutely plummeted down. Here in 2022, we have such a trade deficit with manufactured goods. This is critical. This is why the president has said this is an emergency. The same thing with fuels and other total goods. We have plummeted in this nation's capacity to actually produce things. So yes, this is an emergency, and this is by all means altogether the right thing to do. If we do not reverse this trend, again, going with the absolute calamitous effect of how we are hurtling towards a sovereign debt crisis, this nation does not exist. And yes, there is short-term problems, without a doubt. But it's the same thing by taking medicine you don't want to take. If we don't help the body by intervening and doing what is critically important for this nation, nothing else matters. So this is why how manufacturing has plummeted, and this is why we are in a state of emergency. Thank you. Thanks just for that moment. I want to briefly say something before I begin my remarks. I've gone down in many times to Haiti. We talked about this before and done a lot of mission work down there. Unfortunately, the Hope Help program is set to expire in September. I hope some work is being done in reauthorizing this program. We're trying to nearshore, onshore. We want to stabilize our Caribbean nations, our Central American nations, and Haiti has fallen into such decay right now. It makes Somalia look like Wonderland. We really need to help these nations stabilize in our hemisphere. It helps everybody. So I hope that is just going to be on your radar. HR 1625, the Help Extension Act. Just to shift gears again, I want to talk a little bit about diminimis. The legislation, HR 7979, the End China's De Minimis Abuse Act, did not make it to the floor. However, we're seeing that packages being abused by this loophole, literally with China, overwhelm the CBP, leading to billions of dollars of lost revenue and jobs. This has allowed Chinese companies to send so many goods into this country without paying tariffs. Can you discuss why the administration is taking on de minimis, why this is so necessary?
Yes, it's essentially for all the reasons you just described. De minimis originated as a way for tourists or others to go overseas, buy souvenirs, come back, bring them in duty-free, and that persists, right? That continues. I think everyone's comfortable with that. But what we saw were foreign companies abusing the system and taking advantage of it and building a commercial case for it, their entire business on it, and that ended up undermining a lot of retailers here in the United States. And so it's important to make sure that tool is used for its original purpose and not for other countries to avoid duty payments or things like that.
One of the comments were that we shouldn't be doing tariffs to our friends. Friends don't treat friends with horrible tariffs like we are being done by other countries. So I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we're able to see what the rest of the world has been doing to the United States. I don't think the American public understands this. And this is why I think it's just so critical that we shine the spotlight on this.
Quickly, just with one thing that happened in the pandemic, I'm a physician, and we saw that our supply chain for pharmaceuticals, for health-related PPE, et cetera, is critically at risk during these things. If China were to shut off all its exports overnight, medical supply chains would be one of the industries hardest hit, and we would have American patients literally dying because they could not get medicines or other type of devices. Can you discuss how the Trump administration's trade is helping to secure our health supply chain?
Yes. So first of all, we have to reshore. We have to reshore pharmaceutical production to avoid the very situation you talked about. And we have to do it now. We can't wait for the next crisis. We can't
Right.
wait for the next conflict. We have to do it now. I understand the Commerce Department will be undertaking an investigation of the pharmaceutical supply chain to assess what tools we can use. The President's talked about tariffs that might apply to certain things to incentivize reshoring, but I assume that investigation will also have other ideas as well.
We have to make sure that in this tariff incident, we're not hurting American companies and hurting them over helping out foreign countries. And, going back to, Kamala's famous phrase of getting to the root causes of immigration, they did absolutely nothing to bring industry near shore, trying to prop up Caribbean nations so they won't have everybody trying to run over a border. Look, I've talked to you about Puerto Rico. I was in Puerto Rico this last week, and there's so much of an opportunity to go there and onshore in an American territory to bring back American pharmaceutical industries, so many other industries that help us with our national security. And at the bottom line, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about national security. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'll yield back.
Thank you. I'll recognize myself for questions. Ambassador, thank you for calling and consulting with me before a lot of these trade agreements. So I appreciate the correspondence there because you have. I also want to just raise the significance that I believe AGOA has for this country and those trade preferences with those African nations from a security perspective is extremely important. And I hope that the administration continues to see from a security perspective that trade preferences with those African countries is extremely important.
Well, Chairman, I will certainly share your views with the President, and I've shared them before with others in the White House. And I understand the importance of AGOA to this committee and Congress, and I would encourage the committee, as you look at it and potential renewal, to think about ways to improve it.
And I would love to work with you all to make sure that we can do that. It's just very important. I also I've heard a lot of conversations today, and one thing that I appreciate is Secretary Bessent's comments that I've read, that he says over the last 4 decades, Wall Street got very wealthy. But over the next 4 years, it's Main Street's turn. And that's in fact who the President's been fighting for, is for all those forgotten people in Southeast Missouri, in rural America, that their place of employment is now vacant. My mother was one of those individuals. I have numerous family members that's one of those individuals. And people will talk about their 401ks. But the reality is that the top 10% own 88% of all the stock market. The top 10. Then the next roughly 12%, as the Secretary has said, the next 12% ownership of the stock market is the next 40%. So that bottom 50%, the people who make less than $42,000 a year, those people, they're worried about their debt, their credit card payments, their interest rates. And that is who President Trump is fighting for in bringing more jobs and manufacturing, open up factories and coming down here. And I want to thank you for standing here. I want to thank you for working for this cause. And I think it's extremely important, and it will be transformational. It may be bumpy for a while, but it's about time Main Street is representative instead of Wall Street. I want to ask you a few questions about the European Union. As you know, I have shared my opinion about the European Union and how disappointed I am of how they've taken advantage of U.S. farmers and U.S. agricultures. I heard him say that they're willing to lower their tariffs on industrial goods. That's not good enough, Ambassador. They have to address their non-tariff barriers when it comes to agriculture goods. The country of Honduras purchases more pork than the entire European Union. And there's only 10 million people there. There's 450 million people in the European Union. And then you look at the country of Angola, one of those African countries. They purchase more chicken from us than the entire European Union. And the European Union has a GDP times 200 of that in Angola. These are trade problems. And this administration better continue to fight for the American farmer, that Missouri farmer who's been screwed for such a long time by our friends. And I want to thank the president. I want to thank you for continuing with it. I do want to ask you, do you agree that there's a serious trade problem when it comes to agriculture in the European Union?
Yes, Chairman. It's fundamentally unfair. It's structurally unfair. It has been for decades, and I've been very clear with them that any kind of agreement or negotiation or anything, it has to have an ag component for all the reasons you described.
Super important. Last year, I requested the International Trade Commission to complete a detailed study of the competitiveness of the U.S. rice industry, with a particular focus on the ways that unfair subsidies and other practices in other rice-producing countries harm American rice farmers by distorting markets and reducing export opportunities. The study was completed earlier this year, and I was not surprised to learn that India is one of the worst offenders. Its subsidies and particularly are particularly problematic because of the lack of transparency around some of them. Do you share my concerns with unfair practices in India and elsewhere that harm American rice farmers? And will you attempt to address these issues through any negotiations with India?
Yes, I will. And as you know, Chairman, I'm from Northern California, from rice country there too, so I'm particularly sensitive to that.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and I just want to say thank you, Ambassador Greer, for taking the time to speak with us today. It's great to hear a voice of reason. I want to first thank you for including Germany's withholding tax on IP on USTR's list of investment barriers in the National Trade Estimate. And I look forward to working with you on this and ensuring fair treatment of American businesses across the world. I saw the list, and that was one of them, Section 49, so thank you very much. I am from a district, the second largest ag district in the country, #1 in cattle, hogs, corn, soybeans, and so forth. 20% of our ag production in the United States goes to the export market. So my hope is to see tariffs imposed last week quickly lead to fair and reciprocal market access and to end many of the long-standing agricultural trade barriers around the world. I mean, that is really my hope. So if I may ask you, it's a really interesting time. We have 70 countries that President Trump said last night, 70 countries that want to negotiate, which is incredible. Can you talk to me, do you have the staff and resources to manage all these negotiations at this time, and how can we help?
Thank you. I, of course, could always use more staff. We had some folks leave, USTR career folks leave during the last administration. We have my deputies who are currently going through the confirmation process, but we have a strong staff. We have most of our political appointees in. We have career veteran USTR folks who know these issues, who have been there for many years. I know them from the last time I was there. I work very closely with them. This is a situation where we have embraced the agency, and these folks are truly at the tip of the spear. They're the ones who helped put together this book with all the non-tariff trade barriers that we're putting together. So they know their brief, they know what they're doing, and when the countries come in, there's not a lot of extra homework that needs to be done because we know exactly the barriers we're targeting. So we're doing our best with what we have. I always welcome more staff, of course.
That's great to hear. So there's two types when it comes to trade. Obviously, there's the barriers, the concerns, But also there's the opportunity. I think about agriculture, that we can expand our markets to the UK, to India, to Kenya. There's so many areas that we can expand. Can you just touch on that? You know, we're negotiating with 70 countries, but then we're also want to expand these markets, these other markets. Can you just briefly talk on how we can create expansion for our agricultural community?
Certainly. Again, the foundation of the president's action is to achieve reciprocity, because we think the lack of reciprocity, we know the lack of reciprocity is a driver of this trade deficit that's left us in such a challenging situation. And so as you're seeking reciprocity, and again, we have countries coming and saying, we're interested in reciprocity, part of that is making sure that they're treating us as we treat them. That means that they have to lower their tariffs, they lower their non-tariff barriers, and that's where you get the market access. That's where you get expanded markets. That's where our ag and other producers have the chance to really get their foot in the door instead of little bits and pieces here and there or an uncertain access. You get real access, you get reliable access, something that our farmers can count on.
So just to clarify that, so I can tell my farmers by the end of the day, after this is all settled, we should have dramatically expanded markets for them. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that's the expectation.
Yeah.
I think that's the expectation. We certainly want to, I mean, listen, with some countries, it's easier. They have fewer barriers. With others, it's harder, and it's going to take some time. And in the meantime, they'll have that tariff. But my hope is that we can have a lot of these countries have reciprocal trade with us and make it, we can be more competitive, whether we're farmers or manufacturers or producers, if we have real access to these other markets. Be more competitive here and produce here.
I want to thank you for your response to my letter to the USTR's proposed measure on Chinese-built marine vessels and for discussing it with me last week. The proposal of the USTR to counter China's shipbuilding industry would significantly increase freight costs on U.S. soybeans and soy products, in turn making the price of U.S. soybean products uncompetitive versus other countries. I'm hearing from my constituents that global soybean orders are simply being canceled and grain shippers cannot secure freight past May due to this uncertainty. I just wanted to hear from you again. So what can I tell my soybean producers, I'm the largest in the country, to give them some peace in this matter and what's happening?
Well, first of all, we should have final decision on that by the middle of this month. Second of all, there were a lot of proposed measures in that Section 301 action on shipbuilding. I think that, and this could have been a communications issue, I think some people thought that all of those measures would be imposed. Those were proposed measures for people to comment on and receive feedback. We've now had that process where we've had the feedback, and now we consider which of those measures is most appropriate.